Somewhere in the last week, this happened to you. A song was playing. Maybe you weren't even listening properly. And then a note landed, and something crawled up the back of your neck. The hair on your arms stood up. Your eyes got hot for a reason you could not have defended in court. Stop and look at what actually happened there. Air moved. That's it. Slightly compressed air arriving at the side of your head in a pattern. No calories, no warning about a predator, no information about where the water is or which berries kill you. Nothing an animal trying to stay alive should care about even slightly, and your body responded like it had been touched. Here's the part that should bother you. Every human society ever studied does this. Every single one. We have found people with no writing, no metal, no farming, no permanent houses. We have never found a single group of humans without music. 40,000 years ago, in a cave in southern Germany, in the middle of an ice age, somebody killed a vulture, pulled the long bone out of its wing, and spent hours carefully drilling 5 holes into it. They were cold. They were probably hungry. They would most likely be dead by 30, and they spent that time building a device whose only function was to make the air wobble in an organized way. Why would evolution, which is famously, brutally uninterested in anything that doesn't work, hand us the most useless obsession in the animal kingdom, and then wire it directly into the same reward circuit as food, sex, and cocaine? In 1997, the cognitive scientist Steven Pinker wrote a sentence that music researchers have been angrily quoting at each other ever since. He called music auditory cheesecake. His argument wasn't that music is stupid, it was sharper than that. Cheesecake is not an adaptation. Nobody evolved the cheesecake instinct. We evolved a taste for fat and sugar because fat and sugar were rare, and then, much later, we got clever enough to build a thing that hits those receptors harder than any fruit ever could. Pinker's claim was that music is the same trick. A pleasure technology. Something that picks the locks on systems that evolved for other reasons. Language, emotional vocalization, pattern hunting, and then jams all of them at once. As far as biological cause and effect are concerned, he wrote, music is useless, and here's the uncomfortable thing, he might be right. Serious people still think he might be right. But there's a problem with the cheesecake. Nobody has ever found a culture without it. In 2019, a team led by Samuel Mayer at Harvard did something that sounds obvious and had somehow never been done properly. They went and checked. They assembled nearly 5,000 descriptions of songs from 60 human societies. Reel-to-reel tapes, vinyl, field recordings sitting in the private collections of anthropologists who had been dead for decades. And they asked the boring, essential question, is music actually universal, or do we just assume it is? It's universal. It appeared in every society they looked at, and it kept turning up attached to the same short list of situations: healing the sick, dancing, love, and, over and over, soothing infants. Hold on to the infants, we're coming back to them. Let's go find the physical evidence. In 2008, in a cave called Hohlefels in southern Germany, archaeologists pulled a thin, pale object out of Ice Age sediment. It was a flute, made from the wing bone of a griffin vulture, 13 inches long, 8 millimeters wide, 5 finger holes spaced with obvious care, and a V-shaped notch cut into the end where a mouth goes. Around 40,000 years old. That's the same window in which modern humans first walked into Europe. So we didn't settle in, get comfortable, and then invent music. We arrived carrying it, and it gets older. A few kilometers away, at a site called Geisenklosterlee, there were more flutes, redated in 2012 with higher resolution radiocarbon at 42 to 43,000 years. But the vulture bone isn't even the impressive one, because some of those flutes were made of mammoth ivory. Think about that for a second. A bird bone is already a tube. Nature did the hard part. Ivory is solid and curved, so they split a section of tusk lengthwise, hollowed out each half by hand. Carved matching finger holes across both, then sealed the two halves back together tightly enough to hold air. That is not somebody's first attempt at anything. That's a craft with a history behind it. Failed prototypes, somebody who taught somebody, a tradition already old by the time it left us a single object. Which brings us to the honest problem here. Instruments are the last step, not the first. Before anyone hollowed a bone, there was a voice. There was clapping. There was somebody hitting a hollow log with a stick and noticing that everyone turned around. None of that fossilizes. Ever. So the flutes aren't the beginning of music. They're just the oldest part of music that happens to be made of bone. Now, you may have heard there's something older. Be careful with this one, because it's among the most contested objects in archaeology. In 1995, in a Slovenian cave called Divje Babe, someone found a fragment of cave bear thigh bone with holes in it, possibly 60,000 years old, before modern humans were in the neighborhood, which would make it a Neanderthal flute. It made headlines for 20 years. Musicians recorded on replicas of it. Then, in 2015, a paleontologist named Kajus Diedrich compared it against bone damage from 15 European cave sites and argued it isn't a flute at all, it's a bone chewed by a hyena. Ice Age hyenas had jaws that could punch clean circular holes in the leg bones of bear cubs, and X-rays of the object show no drilling marks and no stone tool work. The argument is still live. Some researchers think it's an instrument, some think it's a leftover, which is, in a way, the perfect artifact for this subject. We're staring at an ancient hole in a bone, trying to decide whether it's art or lunch. Let's flip around and look at the receiver. A sound is a pressure wave, molecules of air shoving the molecules next to them. That's the entire physical event. That wave hits your eardrum and pushes it. The eardrum pushes 3 of the smallest bones in your body, which shove a fluid-filled spiral called the cochlea, lined with thousands of tiny hairs, each one tuned to a different frequency, each one firing when its particular note goes past. Small detail that is not small. Those 3 little bones in your middle ear, they used to be jaw. In our early reptile-like ancestors, they were part of the hinge of the jaw. Over tens of millions of years, they shrank, migrated, and got repurposed into a lever system for hearing. So when a song moves you, it's being delivered into your skull by 3 modified pieces of an ancient jaw. Nothing about us was designed. Everything about us was borrowed. But the ear is only the doorway. The interesting part is what your brain does with the pattern. Your brain is, above almost anything else, a prediction machine. It is constantly guessing what happens next. The next word in the sentence, the next step in the dark, the next beat. And music is the only thing humans have ever built whose entire purpose is to play with that. In 2011, a team at McGill led by Valerie Salimpour put people in scanners while they listened to music that reliably gave them chills. They found something strange. There wasn't one dopamine hit. There were 2, from 2 different places. During the build-up, the bar before the drop, the held breath before the chorus. Dopamine released in the dorsal striatum in a region called the caudate. Then, at the peak, the moment the chills actually hit, dopamine released somewhere else, the nucleus accumbens, the core of the reward system. Same neighborhood that lights up for food and sex. Read that again, because it's the whole mechanism. You are not being rewarded for the sound. You are being rewarded for guessing right. Music is a machine for making your brain place a bet, then paying out. That's why the key change works. Why the silence before the last chorus is almost physically unbearable. Why a song you've heard 400 times still lands. Your brain still runs the prediction and still collects. The chills aren't a bug, they're a payout. So, a species with a dedicated reward system for organized sound and a 40,000-year paper trail. Why? 3 serious answers, and the fight between them is genuinely unresolved. Answer 1. Darwin. In 1871, in The Descent of Man, Darwin argued that music is a courtship display. Same logic as birdsong, same logic as a peacock. Singing well is hard. Hard things are honest advertisements. Sing well, get chosen. Elegant, and it has an obvious hole. If music is a mating display, why do grandmothers sing? Why do toddlers sing? Why is so much of the world's music performed by large groups of people who are related to each other and absolutely not flirting? Answer 2. It glues groups together. Robin Dunbar's lab at Oxford has spent years on this one. Singing, dancing, and drumming all raise your pain threshold, the standard proxy for endorphin release, because measuring endorphins directly means doing things to people that ethics committees dislike. Sing with a group, and your pain tolerance goes up. Dance in synchrony with strangers, and it goes up and you report feeling closer to them. They tested that with silent discos, where the only difference between conditions was whether people were moving to the same beat. And the crucial detail, passively listening, doesn't do it. You have to do it together. The bonding lives in the synchrony. Answer 3, and the one I find hardest to shake, music is a signal that's expensive to fake. In 2021, Samuel Mayer, Max Krasnow, Gregory Bryant, and Edward Hagen proposed that music evolved as a credible signal, a broadcast whose reliability comes from how costly it is to produce. Picture a valley 100,000 years ago, 2 groups, neither can see the other. One group starts singing, not shouting, singing, in time, in parts. 20 voices locking into a rhythm and holding it. That sound crosses the valley carrying information no bluff can imitate. There are many of us. We have practiced. We are coordinated well enough to do a hard thing in perfect time. And we are so unworried about food and safety that we can spend the afternoon doing this. You cannot fake that with 4 exhausted people. The signal is honest because it's expensive. A song, in this reading, is a threat display you can hear a kilometer away. But Mayer and his colleagues argued for a second context where the same logic runs, and it's much quieter than a valley. Human infants are, biologically speaking, ridiculous. A wildebeest runs within a day. Our babies can't hold up their own heads for months and can't be left alone for years. They are the most expensive object in the ancient world. Now put yourself in that world. You have a baby who screams if it thinks it's alone. You have 2 hands, a fire to tend, food to process, and other children. You can't hold it constantly. And an unattended screaming baby doesn't just wear you down, it advertises. So how do you tell an infant I am still here while your hands are full? You sing. Song is continuous proof of presence. It can't be faked at a distance, and it can't be left running while you walk away. It says, I'm close. I'm not busy with anything more important than you. I'm attending to you right now. And it says it while your hands keep working. That's the hypothesis. Here's the test. In 2020, a group including Mayer played 104 American infants, a set of lullabies from societies those babies had never encountered. Unfamiliar languages, unfamiliar instruments, unfamiliar musical systems, compared against non-lullaby songs from equally foreign societies to control for the strangeness. They didn't ask the babies anything because babies are unreliable narrators. They measured heart rate, pupil dilation, the electrical conductance of the skin. The infants relaxed at foreign lullabies, sung in languages nobody in the room spoke, and they did it consistently across the whole first year of life, before they'd had time to learn what a lullaby is supposed to sound like. The songs weren't identical, but they shared a shape. Lullabies across the world tend to be slower, to sit in a narrower band of pitch, and to keep a less rigid beat. And when the parents heard those same unfamiliar recordings, and were asked which one they'd use to calm a crying baby, they overwhelmingly picked the lullabies, songs from cultures they knew nothing about. Something in you recognizes a lullaby as a lullaby without ever being taught. Which means somewhere back there, before language as we'd recognize it, a very tired person figured out that a certain kind of sound would settle a frightened infant, and we all still have the receiver installed. Everything so far has been about us. Time to zoom out. Because 40,000 years is nothing. 40,000 years is yesterday afternoon. In May 2025, the largest study ever conducted on wild chimpanzee drumming was published in Current Biology. Chimpanzees drum, not metaphorically. They hit the huge flat buttress roots at the base of rainforest trees with their hands and feet, and the low boom travels over a kilometer through dense forest. It's how they check in across distance. Researchers gathered recordings from communities across Africa and ran the timing. The drumming is rhythmic, non-random, isochronous, hits spaced at even intervals. The building block every human musical tradition on Earth is made of. And it gets better. The groups don't drum the same way. Western chimpanzees tend to lay down evenly spaced hits. Eastern chimpanzees alternate. Short gap, long gap, short gap, long gap. Regional rhythmic styles. In chimpanzees, our lineages split 6 to 7 million years ago. If both branches drum with structured rhythm, the reasonable conclusion is that the last common ancestor did something like it too. Rhythm did not begin with us. Rhythm is older than our genus. Older than fire, older than stone tools, older than the word older. But here's the line we still seem to hold alone, and it's a strange one. Chimpanzees drum. They do not, as far as we can tell, fall into someone else's beat. The neuroscientist Anirudh Patel proposed that locking your body onto an external rhythm might be a side effect of the circuitry for complex vocal learning, hearing a sound and reshaping your own output to match it. We have that circuitry. Chimpanzees mostly don't. You know who does? Parrots. There's a sulfur-crested cockatoo named Snowball who got mildly famous for bobbing his head in time to pop songs and adjusting when the tempo changed. The honest footnote, careful analysis, found he only locks onto the beat some of the time. He's not a metronome. But he's doing something no chimpanzee has been shown to do. So the picture, roughly, is this. Making a rhythm may be ancient and shared. Falling into someone else's rhythm might be the human part. One last artifact, and it's my favorite object in this whole video. Around 1400 BC, in the city of Ugarit on the coast of what is now Syria, somebody pressed cuneiform into a clay tablet. It's a hymn to Nickel, a goddess of orchards. It has lyrics, it has musical notation, and it has tuning instructions for a 9-stringed lyre. The oldest, substantially complete piece of written music we have. 3,500 years old. Sit with the tuning instructions for a second. Someone wrote down how to tune the strings. That's not a note to yourself. You know how your own instrument works. Tuning instructions exist for one reason. The writer wanted somebody they'd never meet, somebody who might not be born yet, to hear it correctly. 3,500 years ago, a person had a melody, understood they were going to die, and tried to leave it somewhere it could survive them. We can still play it, badly, and with a lot of arguing about the notation, but we can play it. And one last number, about 1.5% of people have congenital amusia, a hardware-level inability to process pitch. It runs in families, it has nothing to do with taste or training. Which means the other 98.5% of you were born with the machine. So, go back to the cave. 40,000 years ago, southern Germany, ice outside, a fire. Somebody sitting with a vulture's wing bone they've been shaping for hours, turning it over, checking the spacing of the holes with a thumb. We will never know what they played. No notation, no witnesses, nothing but the object. But we know one thing, and it isn't nothing. We know it worked. We know it worked because the equipment they were playing to is still installed in you. The ear built from a jaw, the brain that bets on the next beat, the reward system that pays out in goosebumps. They were building a machine for a listener they'd never meet. You're the listener. So the next time a song puts the hair up on your arms, and you can't explain why, and you feel slightly silly about it, don't. That's not a modern feeling, that's a cold cave, 40,000 years ago, still ringing.